Hey everyone, welcome to The New Populist. I'm Dave Brown. If you're new to this channel, please like and subscribe. And I'm also the co-author of the book, Black and White, How the Left is Destroying the Dream of Martin Luther King and Our Founding Fathers. It's available on Amazon. There will be a link in the description, and it will give you a right-leaning perspective on race relations in America. Grab a copy. Now, I want to circle back a couple of weeks to the Senate Banking Committee, their hearing with Saule Omarova, who is Joe Biden's nominee for Comptroller of the Currency, which is a department within the Treasury. And it's a pretty important department, which is why I'm covering this, because she, if you have watched my other videos, is fairly radical. Now, she has a lot of very interesting proposals. One of her biggest things is a thing called the National Investment Authority, which would allow the U.S. government to create a Fed-like organization that would redirect private funds into certain projects that were, quote unquote, not profitable, but good for the public, that would fight climate change. And these projects would be backed up by the federal government through the Federal Reserve or the Treasury if they crash and burn. And when you go through all the details, it really is a radical proposal. And she also has the idea to transfer private bank accounts to the Federal Reserve System. So in totality, she is very radical. And this is why anybody with common sense should oppose her nomination. Now, during the hearing, we had two senators I want to highlight, Senator Kennedy and Senator Scott. Now, to their credit, they did focus on a lot of the things that she recently said, and both of them did this pretty well. I want you, though, to listen to what Senator Kennedy said. He said a lot of good things, and then he said something at the end that kind of hurts the effort. It's grandstanding, and it sort of allows the media and the left to sort of change the narrative and make her look like a victim. Check out this clip.
This is America. You can believe what you want, but we can't just let anybody be controller of the currency. You wrote your thesis in college at Moscow State University on, the title was Karl Marx's Economic Analysis and the Theory of Revolution in the Capital. But you won't send Senator Toomey a copy. You studied at Moscow State University, scientific communism, which is the science regarding the working class struggle and the socialist agenda. In 2019, not 30 years ago, in a Canadian documentary, you called the financial services industry, quote, a quintessential asshole industry. You wrote a paper called Systemically Significant Prices, calling for the federal government to set wages, food, gas prices. In 2020, you wrote a paper called The People's Ledger, where you said we need to abolish bank accounts and make everybody set up an account at the Fed where the federal government will have access to your data. In 2020, you wrote another paper called The Climate Case for a National Investment Authority, where you said what we need to do, the oil and gas industry, is have the federal government bankrupt them so we can tackle climate change. In 2019, you joined a Facebook group, a Marxist Facebook group, to discuss socialist and anti-capitalist views. Now, that's what I see from your record, and you have the right to believe every one of these things. You do. This is America. But I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know whether to call you professor or comrade.
Senator, I'm not a communist. I do not subscribe to that ideology. I could not choose where I was born.
So everything was great there. He pointed out her recent things that she has proposed that are very radical. But then, because it's the Senate and we know senators like to grandstand and have that quote, he had to say, I don't know if I should call you comrade. And of course, that allows her to respond by saying, how dare you say that? That's red baiting. I'm a victim. I was born in the Soviet Union where I didn't have a choice. I'm anti-communist. And so I like Senator Kennedy, but I hate when our senators allow the left or give people an opportunity to change the argument. So she never addresses her radical proposals. All she addresses is this idea that she's a communist. Now, is she a communist? Well, I want to do another video about this because a lot of times we make the mistake of calling people communists who aren't actual communists. What she is, though, is I would call an authoritarian socialist. Now, is that distinction between a communist and an authoritarian socialist, is it big? Not really. Both of them have a strong central government that controls everything. If you're a communist, then you believe that the government should own everything, and there's a abolition of private property versus a authoritarian socialist that doesn't advocate for the abolishment of private property, but has the government have their hand and tentacles into every aspect of your life. So they're both terrible, but when we call people a communist when they're not technically a communist, it makes us look bad and allows the left and the media to reframe the argument. Now, check out, though, what Senator Scott said. I think he did a great job here. He ignored some of the things she said in the past. I know Senator Kennedy talked about her thesis paper when she was in college. And I think it's fair to say that when she was in the Soviet Union, she did lack academic freedom. She had to sort of go along with the program. And I don't want to hold that against anybody. If we were in the same situation, what would we do? So as Senator Scott points out, I'm not going to point out what you did in the Soviet Union. I'm going to point out what you did recently. Check out this clip.
From South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to note that not a single Republican on this committee has mentioned anything other than your position related to your nomination. I keep hearing my friends on the other side refer to personal attacks. One thing I can say and be very proud of on this committee from these Republicans, not a single person has talked about anything other than your stated positions as it relates to this nomination. So any suggestions otherwise is simply hogwash. I want to be fair, and I will be fair. I won't be hyperbolic, but I will be frank and honest. I cannot think of a nominee more poorly suited to be the comptroller of the currency based solely on your public positions, statements, and the weight of your writings than you are. Let me just quote you versus anybody else. On the Green New Deal champion, you proposed taking economic and climate policy making from Congress and creating an unaccountable bureaucracy called the National Investment Authority. In a roundtable this year, you pushed to make the NIA the dedicated institutional platform at the federal level for really being the kind of fighting muscle of the Green New Deal and fighting muscle of, all of these other movements that pursuing environmental justice, social, economic justice, equality, and so on. Your disdain for the financial services industry. In 2019, in a documentary titled, I'll be kind, Buttholes, A Theory, you said, the financial services industry, in my view, and I don't think I'm alone here, is the quintessential butthole industry. Killing American Energy and Jane Family Institute seminar in March of this year, you proposed bankrupting the coal and oil and gas industries, saying we want them to go bankrupt if we want to tackle the climate change. That's really hard to misunderstand. On nationalizing banking, last year, i.e. 2020, not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, just last year. Paper you titled The People's Ledger, How to Democratize Money and Finance the Economy. You proposed reforms to, and I quote, effectively end banking as we know it by nationalizing, the quote you had was effectively ending banking as we know it. How? By nationalizing retail banking. As it relates to the end of private banking, your words, no one else's. This year, not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, this year, you said you proposed to imagine what it would be like if instead of just a public option for deposit banking, instead of just a public option for deposit banking, this would be actually the full transition. In other words, there would be no more private bank deposit accounts, and all of the deposit accounts would be held directly at the Fed. I want to say that one more time because this is what really, among all the other comments, it's quite disturbing. This is not a position that you took years ago. This is something that you spoke to this year. And I quote, imagine what it would be like if instead of just a public option for deposit banking, this would be actually the full transition. In other words, there would be no more private bank deposit accounts, and all of the deposit accounts will be held directly at the Fed. I don't have any questions for you because there's nothing you can say today to undo what you've said for years, including this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So Senator Scott points out that in the last 5 years, she has made proposals that are absolutely radical. And how does the left respond to this? And so what I did was I looked at some articles, and what I basically noticed was that the left kind of whitewashes what she's actually said and believes. For example, in NPR, they say, Omarova suggests the federal government could offer a bank account to every American through the Federal Reserve, which is true. She said that. Supporters of that proposal say it would reduce the number of unbanked persons significantly. Critics argue it would undermine commercial banks. Now, unbanked persons, of course, we know the left likes to enact policies that ostensibly are there to help people. Now, in this case, we have unbanked persons. Of course, I go, when I was 16, I had a driver's license. I went to the bank. I got a bank account. It's not that difficult. Why we need the Federal Reserve to do this, I don't know. Now, does this mean that all private accounts would be with the Federal Reserve? It doesn't, but she suggests that it would sort of make things easier if that were the case, which really means that she supports having the Federal Reserve taking over all private bank accounts. Now, as far as her National Investment Authority, there is this piece by the Los Angeles Times that says this. On the asset side of the banking ledger, Omarova has made the case for a so-called National Investment Authority that would manage public financing of socially beneficial investments such as green energy, other programs aimed at combating global warming, and in physical infrastructure. As Omarova observed in her white paper on the subject, U.S. investment in clean energy has been hovering around $56 billion annually, or about 1/10 of what it should be for the U.S. to shoulder its part of the responsibility for fighting global warming. The National Investment Authority, she wrote optimistically, would help to solve the climate crisis, create well-paying domestic jobs, enhance the resiliency and productivity of the American economy, and systematically translate the vision of a clean future into a tangible socioeconomic and political change. Now, is that what the National Investment Authority is going to do? I will post a link to my video on the National Investment Authority, where I go through her writings and things she has said about the National Investment Authority and what it actually is. And it is a lot different than how the LA Times describe it here. And so they're giving this, painting this picture of an organization that's going to make things better, create jobs. And of course, every time they create an organization to make things better and create jobs, it does just the opposite. If it were that easy to make the economy grow and to create jobs, we would never have economic depressions. We would never have high unemployment. So of course, anytime the government proposes a program that gives them more power to help us, it really just helps them. And so NPR, the LA Times, they are not representing what she actually proposes and what her dream is for this country. They are changing it and making it seem relatively innocuous, but we do the research, we go through her actual papers, her actual video interviews, and we break down what she says, and we can find that what she actually proposes is a lot worse than the left-wing media is pointing out. And of course, we expect the media to do that. Their job is to cover up and to hide their radicals while they push them forward. So go ahead and check out those videos. There will be a link in the description. Now, will she be confirmed? Well, according to a report from Axios, there are 3 members of the Senate Banking Committee, John Tester, Mark Warner, and Kristen Sinema, all Democrats, who reportedly said that they're not going to vote for her, as well as John Hickenlooper and Mark Kelly. So thankfully, as of now, it looks like her confirmation will not go through, and she will not serve in that position. Now, are these Democrats against her nomination for altruistic reasons? My guess is that the banking industry has its tentacles, to be fair, in both parties, and someone as radical as her, that scares them. And of course, the bankers, they support a lot of people in our Congress, and they made the phone call, hey, this person's a little too radical. We're all for, climate change stuff and everything like that. But when you're calling to transfer all private bank accounts to the Federal Reserve System, that is too radical for the bankers. Obviously, that undermines them completely. So whether or not their reasons for being against their nominations are good or bad, well, suffice to say, it looks like it won't go through. So that is a good thing. Now, who will be put in their position? Will that person be just as radical? Well, my bet is that they'll find somebody who's a little more palatable. And what they usually do is they bring somebody who is radical, but it's much better hidden, so they can sort of slide them in there. So we will see who that next person is. So again, if you haven't seen my previous videos on the National Investment Authority and her interviews that she did recently, where she just sort of describes all of her philosophies as far as what she wants for this country, check out those videos. They're very interesting. And it really shows just how radical the left is right now, and the people the left are supporting. So check it out. That's it for now. Again, if you're new to this channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.